I'm Meredith. There we go. I'm Meredith Howell. We have two of the staff members from Eastern Oregon Visitors Association, and I'll have them introduce themselves as we go on. But what I'm going to do now is pull up the slide set and we'll get started. Okay, whoops. Okay. Okay, so here we are. Welcome to the two-part series. We're going to be spending a couple of days together, and I'm Meredith Howell, and we have joining us Kate Harbor. Kate, can you say hello so everybody can see who you are? Unmute yourself.
Yep. Hi, I'm Kate, and I'm unmuted now. I'm with the Eastern Oregon Visitors Association.
And Kate, what's your role at Eastern Oregon Visitors Association?
I am the Outdoor Recreation and Trail Development Coordinator, and I'm funded through the Rare AmeriCorps program. So this year, I'm staying on a second year and supporting the grants program.
Great. So she helped me put this program together for today because it's about the grant. We're going to focus on the grant that EOVA gives away. And Kate's going to be manning the chats. So you can either ask questions of me by just unmuting or raising your hand, or you can put them in the chat. And then also joining us is the Executive Director of the Eastern Oregon Visitors Association, Elena Carollo. And Elena, you want to just say hi to everybody so they can?
Yes, hello. Thank you all for joining today. As Meredith said, super excited to have Kate working with her in this presentation. And I'm really here today to help with Q&A, as this is our second regional grants program. So yeah, excited to have you all joining us. And back to you, Meredith. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Elena. All right. So what we want to do today is to start thinking about the work that your business or your organization is doing and how what you're trying to accomplish aligns with what the funders that want to fund tourism work are doing. We're going to introduce the Eastern Oregon Visitors Association grant application, talk about the rules of the application and what they're looking for in projects. And that's where both Kate and Elena will have some good advice. And then we're also going to talk about the first part of planning your grant project out, which is defining the scope of work and what goes into doing that. So that's part one. When you come back tomorrow, we're going to talk more about the writing elements of how do you tell a convincing story that actually moves somebody to want to make sure that whatever you're trying to do actually happens. We'll talk about one of the hardest parts of the grant, which is a needs statement. So what that is and how you create a convincing one. And then we'll also talk about how do you measure whether you're successful with what you're trying to do. So defining and measuring outcomes. Now, the other part is at the end of today, I'm going to introduce you to a couple of other grant programs that you might explore. And the links to those funding sources are in the PowerPoint. And I know that Kate has already shared that with you. So you have all the materials that we're going to present today, and then this evening, I'll be sending you the materials, or Kate will, for tomorrow's session. So I think we're ready to get going. Okay. Now, most of you are tourism-related organizations or businesses. So if I drew a circle in the middle of a slide and I asked, what is your organization? Why are you there? What are you hoping to accomplish? If you had to put all the things that you were trying to do in the circle, what might you say? Could somebody unmute and maybe let us know, what are you trying to accomplish?
I would say value in our community.
Okay, who is that?
Shannon Adair,
And what organization again?
1188 Brewing Company.
Okay, great. So value. What about when I heard you talk about what you wanted to do and not using a distributor, it's a sense of self in community, a kind of a community pride, a richness of what your community is. You're trying to convey that. You're trying to have more people identify John Day as a really neat area where they'd like to spend more time. So all of those things kind of go into your mission. And each of us, we have work to do to find what our mission is. So usually we have our board of directors or our staff or volunteers or whoever is involved do exercise every once in a while to think about, what are we trying to do? What's our mission? Has it changed? Does it need updating? That's terrific. Now, let's keep this kind of yellow circle in mind. That's our mission. Well, the next thing we need to do is decide, what's the right work to be doing for our group right now? We're just going to say that most groups can't accomplish all of their mission at once. So we kind of have to divide and conquer. And we do that by adding 2 more circles. The blue one, which is, what are you actually capable of doing right now or in the next few years? And the orange circle is, well, what does the community need? What's actually feasible? What's changed? And how does that affect what part of our mission we can actually go after? So if you look at the intersection of those 3, then that actually defines what work you should be doing in the near future, now and in the near future. So let's go back to the yellow circle. If that's our whole mission, how much of our whole mission are we actually trying to accomplish at one time? Well, in this case, in this diagram, it looks like only about a 6. So we've taken these other 2 circles, what are you capable of doing, and what's happening in the community or the external environment, and we find that we can actually narrow down what we should be working on by superimposing these circles. Now, does anybody have an idea about what the orange and blue circles are telling us? That's actually our strategic work. That's what comes out of a strategic plan. So it takes our mission and it helps us make good choices about what we should be focusing on right now. That's the value of a strategic plan. Instead of trying to accomplish all of this mission, you're just going to work on the smart work that actually needs to be done and that you're going to be successful at. Okay, great. So now we have a mission and we've narrowed it down using a strategic plan to identify what we should be working on. Well, that's great. So here's our mission for our organization. Now, the other thing that you have to know about funders is that they have their own mission, right? So the Eastern Oregon Visitors Association, they have a mission too. And if you're planning to go after funding from them, then you have to understand that that your missions have to overlap. If they don't overlap, if you're the Boys and Girls Club of America and you have nothing to do with tourism, then if you're the yellow organization, you've got your mission, it overlaps with the Eastern Oregon Visitors Association, so they're going to be a good choice for going after grant funding. if you don't have anything in common with the mission, like of the Boys and Girls Club, then you're wasting your time asking them for money. Because as this visual shows, grants are really contracts. The Eastern Oregon Visitors Association wants to hire your organization to make them look good, because you're going to help them accomplish their mission. And so your grant to them in the very biggest picture is just telling them how you're going to do their work for them. Does that make sense? Now, if that's the case, the first thing is you're going to need to know what your mission is, and you're going to need to find out what Alana and Kate are trying to do at the Eastern Oregon Visitors Association, because it's that sweet spot where there's overlap, where they're going to want to bring you on board and have you help them do their work. So they're not trying to keep it a secret what their mission is. It's right there on their webpage. They want to develop, market, and promote Eastern Oregon, the region, to visitors, right? Increase economic vitality and quality of life for residents. Okay, that's great, but that's kind of broad, right? And so just like organizations have strategic planning, the Eastern Oregon Visitors Association has done a lot of strategic planning to figure out what part of their mission is most important to them. And they're actually willing to share that with you too. So the first thing, the orange circle, what's needed and feasible? Well, they've done that by listening to a whole bunch of stakeholders, businesses and folks working in tourism in the area. They've developed the regional structure, and they want to turn around and fund you guys to do your work because you're going to make them look good, right? So that's what they'd like to do. And Kate, do you see somebody would like to come in to join us? Now, on the other side, what are you capable of doing? Well, 2 decades ago, it was kind of hard to get tourism work funded in Eastern Oregon. But the parent company, Travel Oregon, actually received some real boosts in funding through 2 pieces of legislation in 2003 and 2016. And that set up the transient lodging taxes on a statewide level. And that's brought in a whole bunch of revenue that can now be distributed through these regions to groups like yours. So that's where these grant programs are coming from. So they're capable of doing a lot of work themselves. Elena and Kate are promoting tourism to the area, but they also have the money to fund a grants program and to help invest in the work that you're doing. So that's what we're here to talk about. So here are the different tourism regions that have been set up in the state. Each one of these regions is like Alana and Kate. They're focusing on the tourism assets in their region, and they're focusing on bringing people from out of the state to their region. They each have a mission. It's different because they're different geographical places, and they each have their own strategic plan that is specific to their region. Kate, are we at slide 14 yet?
Great, thanks, Meredith. So as Meredith mentioned, we are a regional destination management organization. So our region covers the 11 counties, and we also serve the 2 federally recognized tribes in Eastern Oregon. And one way we do fulfill our mission is through this regional grants program. And our role as your destination management organization is really to be the conduit of information between you, our local partners, and Travel Oregon, our statewide tourism organization. And Travel Oregon offers a great range of opportunities, funding and programs. And the best way to access these resources really is to connect with your local destination management organization, Elena or myself. Next slide, please.
Well, let me ask if anybody has any questions about the structure right now, because for some of you, this might be the first time that you've seen this. One question I have is, this DMO stands for Destination Marketing Organization. What are some examples of DMOs in the region, Kate?
Yep, these can either be, they function kind of as the local tourism arm. So that can either take the form of a chamber of commerce, or sometimes it's housed in the local government, or it's an independent entity.
So visitor centers in most communities would be one.
Yeah.
Chambers of commerce. So they're the ones that are responsible for getting information about tourism assets out to the public. Great. Okay.
Oh, and I think, yeah, so here we go. So our staff at Eastern Oregon Visitors Association includes Elena Carollo, our executive director. Next slide. And myself, Kate Harbor. I focus on destination development and outdoor recreation. And beyond the scope of this grant program, we love to talk with you all. So please reach out whenever you have questions about what's going on or new initiatives you want to share. Next slide. Next slide.
Okay, so now we're going to focus in on the funds that Eastern Oregon Visitors Association has, that they are trying to get out to both the destination marketing or destination management.
It's marketing or management.
Okay, organizations, or directly to businesses like the brewery in John Day. Okay.
Great. So as Meredith mentioned, we all have, the RDMOs have our own strategic plans. It's called a Regional Cooperative Tourism Program Plan. And this is, our North Star, and it's built out of feedback from stakeholders like yourself. And this is a great place to start if you want to get to know our priorities. And so you can follow that link in the slide to learn more about our past and future regional priorities.
Okay.
Next slide. And this upcoming 2021 to 2023 biennium plan does include funding for our regional grants program. And we'll be focusing on these 4 key initiatives. And in simple English, these 4 initiatives are: 1, to bring visitors to Eastern Oregon for overnight stays; 2, develop products and experiences that feel authentic to and respectful of Eastern Oregon and its communities; 3rd, we want to support projects that are in the areas of outdoor recreation, culture and heritage, and agritourism; and finally, we want to help provide professional development and training opportunities to support our tourism industry professionals.
Great. So as a grant writer, all of us are thinking, okay, how is what our organization is trying to do fit into one of these initiatives? And Kate, when you mentioned the first one, I see it says domestic and international markets. So can you explain more about that?
Sure. So, international is overseas or Canada. Domestic is more locally within the United States. We understand that there is a lot up in the air with travel due to COVID, but yeah, those are the 2 markets to focus on.
Okay, great. So within the state, right? So my guess is you still promote that, but your priorities are going beyond kind of within the state and reaching further to get visitors from further areas.
That's right. Yeah, the starting place is over 50 miles away from your local area. but preferably out of state. And we'll get more. There are some rules around that with our marketing grants, but we'll get into that later.
Okay, terrific. Okay, so basically what you just heard was we now know what the mission of the Eastern Oregon Visitors Association is. We know what their strategic work is. So now let's delve into the grants program.
Yep. So some steps that you all can take to make a really strong proposal. First, we do recommend that you reach out to your board of directors or any relevant decision makers to get their input on approval of your project. And we recommend you do this early so you can catch any red flags early on. I did grant writing before this job, and this was a steep learning curve for me to always ask permission from the people who are going to be doing the work and signing off on it. So that's the first important thing I want to underline. Second, we do strongly encourage you to reach out to your local destination management or marketing organization. So those chambers and visitors associations, reach out to them to discuss your project. This can be really helpful because they may be pursuing similar initiatives or have other ideas that could help your proposal. And third, and this is also very important, you are required to fill out a pre-application form prior to submitting your full application. And this form will go live on our website on Friday, October 1st, and will close on November 19th. And so just if you haven't filled out a pre-application form by November 19th, you will not be able to submit a full application. So I can't emphasize that enough. And finally, when you do complete your application, just make sure that you have all of your required documents, which we'll expand on later in the presentation.
Okay.
Next slide.
Now that all seems really simple as you say it, but in 2 weeks when we get back to this, if we have questions, can we give you a jingle, Kate?
Definitely. We would love to hear your questions. And all this information is also available on our website, so it's not disappearing after this presentation. So these are the important dates for our 2021 program. And as you can see, again, the pre-application will open on Friday, October 1st. And the other two dates to really underline are November 19th, which is the last day to get the pre-application form submitted. And then December 3rd at 5 p.m. is the last day to submit your full application. And late submissions won't be accepted. So just please be sure to get your materials in by 5 p.m. And then grant awards will be announced on January 21st, and you'll have a year to complete your project. And we'll also be reaching out to anyone who submitted an application on the 21st to notify you of the status of your proposal.
Terrific.
And once the application window closes, our grants review committee will review your applications. And this year's team is still being finalized, but it's traditionally made up of individuals from EOVA's board of directors, as well as other tourism professionals. Next slide.
Okay, Kate, do you mind if we just pause to
Sure.
see if anybody has questions?
Of course.
Now, is there somewhere we can go to see what projects have been funded in the past? Is that on the webpage?
Yes, Elena, you can back me up on this. I think it might not be live at the moment, but we can get that on our website pretty quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. We'll get that on there. I think there's a probably old press release from our last grant cycle that outlines them, but we'll make it, we'll update it so it's at the top of the list. Great question.
Okay.
Thanks, Meredith.
Yeah. Okay, back to you, Kate.
Great. So as you're working on your application, there are some common errors that you should keep an eye out for. And these are just things we've learned from our last round of doing this program and things I encountered in my time doing grant writing. First, these grant dollars cannot pay for in-state marketing. So if your project does include a marketing component, you'll just need to describe your marketing distribution plan and budget in your application. Second, make sure your budgets are balanced. Third, we do require a 10% cash match, and this must be identified in your application. And finally, as you're doing your project planning, make sure your timeline is well thought out and realistic. We'll be looking closely at this, and it will make your life a lot easier in the future. So that's all I have to share on this slide, Meredith, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, terrific. And I'm going to bring it up again so I can unfreeze it. All right. So Kate's given you some advice about their program, and she mentioned, well, we've got some ideas of things that were funded in the past, and we have some strategic initiatives of our own. But now we need to start thinking like a grant writer. So I have a matrix here, and it's got 4 combinations. And I want to know what you guys think is the most important. So it's pretty easy to see that if we have a good idea and good planning, that's going to be in the money. And we'd be a little worried if we only had a fair idea and fair evidence of planning in our proposal. We'd be a little concerned about whether we would get funding. But my question for you is, what's better, a fair idea with good planning or a good idea with fair planning? Is anybody brave enough to unmute and offer some thoughts?
This is Jalay from Spoken Hostel in Mitchell. And I think they can have equal value, to be honest, because sometimes you may not come up with a good idea, but you may have, or a great idea, but you may have a good idea and not enough time to get solid, good planning, but that's not a reason to quit. If you go into it with fair planning, I think, as a novice, that you actually stand a chance if you can communicate that well.
Okay. I really like your rationale and the way you explained it. Does anybody have other ideas? Remember, I said, think like a grant writer. So as a grant writer, I'm always going back to what's the funder's mission and what's the funder's strategic ideas? Because if I'm going to be a grantee or get a contract to make them look good, I need to know what they care about. So the actual answer is, it depends on who you're applying to. So there are some funders like the Ford Family Foundation, and their thinking is they mostly give money in rural communities, and they don't expect every rural community to have a crackerjack grant writer. So they're more concerned with your idea and how it's going to help the community. If your planning isn't up to par yet, they might actually come in and help you with some of the planning elements. So they're really more concerned with the idea. There are other funders, however, that are not going to give you an award unless all of the planning elements are there. If without those planning elements, carefully thought out, you're not even actually going to be eligible to receive a grant. And so you actually really have to know what the funder cares about the most. So now the question for Kate and Alana is, where do you guys fall? Are the planning elements important? Are there certain requirements that we have to show, or is it good enough just to have a fantastic idea? So Elena, do you mind if I put you on the spot and ask you kind of for the way you interpret that?
Yeah, no, I think that's the way you explained it's really great. And I think for us, the good planning does play a large role with our grant cycle. We do want projects to be completed within a year from when the grants are announced. So having that timeline really well thought out, laid out, kind of having those check marks along the way will play a key role in the decision making process. I will say too, I mean, we do recognize that life happens, things come up. And if you were to get awarded a grant and timelines, start to look like they're not tracking, we want to have those conversations early on just so we can stay on top of that. But in the initial grant application, having a pretty tight timeline and planning spelled out will be extremely helpful.
Great. Great. So the takeaway from this slide, of course, Elaine is hoping that everybody comes in with a great idea and great planning. But you only have a year to do your project. And so that's going to really require some planning on your part to convince Alana and the grant team that you can get this done. There's a realistic chance of that happening. Going back to our blue quadrant, for the Ford Family Foundation, they don't have an end to their grants. So you don't only have a year to do it, which means that they can wait on the planning to happen. It can be part of the process. But because they have such a short timeline, we need to see the planning elements. So we'll be talking about good planning in just a minute. What's a good idea for this EOVA grant program? Well, again, thinking like a grant writer, it's not what it's not what Meredith thinks is a good idea. I've got to think, what is Alana and Kate, our Travel Oregon, going to think of as a good idea? So again, we have to go back to their strategic initiatives. Anything that helps them accomplish their strategic initiatives are going to be a good idea. So for Travel Oregon, for all of their grants, it can't be about a community activity that is just for the community. It has to pull visitors in to come and stay. And it has to be about the tourism economy. So that's a really hard kind of lens of, I think I have really good ideas, but my good ideas don't matter. It's what the funder is going to think of as a good idea. So some ideas, project ideas for things that might get funded through this program are signage to let people know where you are, maybe some interesting facts about your destination, marketing materials that you can produce and distribute far and wide. Your community, your town might create an image library of all the activities that are in your town. You might create a video about Vail that would entice people to come. Trail development, trail maps, agri-projects, and agri-project tours. Those are all ideas that would closely align with EOVA. And as Elena said, she'll actually post the ideas that got funded to help you out for ideas. So just as a summary, again, we're looking for that mission overlap. So actually, what I'd like to do now, we've got the time to do this, is to hear from some of you about your ideas of what you're thinking about for these EOVA funds. So let's hear from some of you. What are you thinking about?
This is
Okay,
Todd. No,
Okay,
go ahead, Chris.
Okay, I'll go first. We have a wine event that we do in the summer, and the last 2 years it's been canceled. And it's mainly been a wine event that's been focused for local, but I was thinking we would like to pair up with Walla Walla Wine Alliance, excuse me, and maybe do a joint project at our Fraser Farmstead Museum and make it a little bit more robust, and maybe even reach out to Tri-City residents and truly make it a really good wine event instead of such a community local event that just gets a few people in. So we would need help with marketing and all of those kind of things.
and Chris, you're right on the border, so it's fairly easy for you to market to another state, right?
Yes, Gateway is really important, and having them as a partner would be really important as well.
Okay, I love the idea. Elena, what do you think as the EOVA voice? Good alignment?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, agritourism is definitely one of our key marketing and development pillars. And, you know, I think really speaking to how this can encourage overnight stays, like highlighting, you know, what else, you know, the event would be offering, I think sounds exciting. So, yeah.
Great. Okay, Todd, what do you have for us?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of touch on trails. I know that was mentioned. I've got a senior at the high school doing a senior project right now. We're looking at developing a trail around our airport. And then we've also got a butte here in Vail that a lot of people hike up. BLM uses it. I really think it'd be, you know, nice to have a good completed trail that could be used for the public. Right now, there's a lot of private land, but they allow people to hike on it. But, you know, maybe getting something official in there and getting it on a map that, you know, could be a destination for people.
Okay, I love the trail idea. And how are you going to, where does the promoting it to people outside of Oregon come in? Can you add that piece to your project?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be some sort of marketing. I know there's a lot of apps out there that capture all the different trails in different areas. Outside of that, I'm pretty new to this, so I'm sure I'd be doing some research on who could help me and what the best path there would be.
Perfect. Best path, was that pun intended?
Yeah.
And I bet Elena has that knowledge, and so might your local DMO. So that's kind of the reason for connecting with these stakeholders as you design your project, because I bet they would have some thoughts about how you might accomplish getting the news about your new trail out to the public.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, who else has an idea they'd like to share?
This is Rebecca Colbert. And the idea that we have is we have a passport program which involves 8 different museums or cultural centers within Baker County. And we started it last year to local people for the local area. And we need to expand it out further, but with COVID so far, we haven't been able to do that. So the idea is to expand our funding with using banners and then marketing further out, because we currently market to Eastern Washington and to Eastern Washington and then into Western Idaho. That's where a lot of our tourism comes from. And we wanted to improve our marketing to bring in more from those areas, but we also have a lot of people who come in from overseas, international, and again, it's improving our marketing to those areas.
So you already have the experience, you have the passport, it's already working, that's great. And now you're going to do some new marketing And so asking for dollars for the new marketing,
Yes.
and you know, you might put some money in there for additional passports because it's going to be so wildly successful. You're going to have to grow your program.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Maybe some new signage if you need that, because it's going to be the next best thing in Baker County.
Yeah, that was part of the marketing that we're going to try and do, was do different signage.
Terrific. Love it. Okay. Somebody else.
This is
Shannon?
July. Oh,
Okay,
I'm sorry.
great. Delay, go ahead.
Well, in short, it's kind of a driving traveling tour that's got a downloadable version of things that you're about to see or going to see or want to see so that you can make your own route. But it is in a tri-county area. And so it teaches not only a little history, but there's a little bit of fun thrown in about folklore stories and things like that. And what I think it does is it gives people a reason to drive rather than just a reason to stop, and let their adventure begin to grow. So there's what I think is a great idea, but in looking at how that might align with EOVA, I can see that being something that starts small and grows within several regions, not just one specific region. So I guess not only do I have an idea that I've just thrown out there, but I have a question of, is that something I'm thinking too big when I write a grant, or do I need to scale back a little bit and just start regionally in the John Day territory first?
That's a great question. So to me, it sounds like you're right, it's a great idea. And it needs to be phased. So what can you actually accomplish in that first year? And be successful at, and also not just do the stories, but do the marketing that pulls people to the area, and be able to measure that worked. And then you can add on additional stories and additional parts of the route.
Great idea.
So there's actually a group in the Columbia Gorge that is doing something really similar. They're trying to get people away from the hot spots like Multnomah Falls, and they're trying to take them to the less well-traveled, also very cool spots. And they're doing that through audio stories.
Uh-huh.
And so it's a project that's been going on for several years, and they can keep creating more stories. And so the production costs to do more stories, you could go back for another grant in another year once you get the project launched. So not trying to accomplish the whole vision in 1 year is my advice to you. And it's a great vision.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. We've got space for one more idea. Who wants it?
This is Randall Melton from Temescala Cultural Institute.
Great.
One of the ideas that we had was, or one of the things we're looking at, is to revise our website to make it a little more inviting, and also to have more updated information, and to really work on pulling people who aren't in the area to the museum as a destination, rather than just somewhere where they stumble across or that's in their backyard. Would that be something that would fit?
That sounds great to me. No, I'm not the EOVA. So let's ask Elena about that one.
Yes, past projects that we did fund in our first cycle did go towards website redevelopment. I would say, really this is where the timeline and what you're trying to accomplish really will come into play. Something that is also really helpful is just like, really talking about in terms of websites, like how will you be, tracking traffic to that, and just really some of the metrics and those key performance indicators on website development. Because I will say, I think we did get a fair amount, around that. And so just wanting to make sure that it's a super strong application and really speaks to the need and how it will really elevate from where where you're currently at. But yeah, I think it sounds exciting.
Okay, so I heard we need the evaluation tools. We'll be talking more about that tomorrow. But also think about how you can really use these updates to cater to folks outside of Oregon. Are you going to talk about how do you get there from different airports in the area, or for the best way to get there from highways? Places, maybe you could connect to places that people could stay and other tourism sites when they come to your the Institute to package a trip. So I think that's also an exciting idea. Okay, so I've heard some really good ideas by the way. I hope that you'll see those same grant applications by, is it December 3rd, Kate, the deadline? Good.
That's right.
And I have to say, you guys have an aggressive timeline from the deadline to the awards. You're going to be really busy in December and January. So good luck with that. Okay, so we've talked about good ideas that are mission and strategically aligned with your funders. Now let's start talking about planning and what's involved in getting a grant submitted. So this is a part where this is a critically important part of grant writing, and it has really nothing to do with grant writing. It's really project management. And I'm not talking about actually doing the project, but going from an idea that you have to the blue ribbon, which in this case is just meeting that December 3rd deadline. And all of the things that have to happen to get you there feeling like you're really proud of the work that you're submitting, and that Eastern Oregon Visitors Association would be lucky to fund you because this is going to be an awesome project. So how do we get what are the steps from getting from our idea to having that great feeling about submission? And just from my icons, what you can see is it's going to involve people. Grant writing, some of us like to think that we can sit at home with our deluxe computers and make it all happen from there. But because most of us are connected with organizations and people run organizations, there's going to be a lot of communication and probably a good amount of negotiating and decision making that happens for our grant plans. So let's take a look at that. So starting with our idea, the first thing is you have to decide, how are we going to organize the work to get us to our deadline? Who's going to be involved and who's going to do what? I call this the quarterbacking. So then we're going to have to write the project plan. We're also going to have to provide supporting documents. We'll talk more about those later. We get our first draft, and then we need to go through a review process. So there aren't many of us that can write a perfect grant the first time. In fact, I'll say nobody can. So how many times do you think I have to rewrite my grants before I feel really good about them? Maybe 6 or 7 times. And me reading my own work 6 or 7 times is not very helpful. So if I can find other people to read my work, maybe even people that are part of my organization, then one, more of us will care about this project. and we'll have a better project that we submit. So that's what we're doing. Now, a lot of funders, including Eastern Oregon Visitors Association, ask for letters of support. So at the same time that you're working on the proposal, you've got to be asking outsiders to let everybody know how they're going to be connected to your work and how they're just as excited about this happening as you are. So that's going to take some time management. So if you had to guess, how long do you think it takes for a project that you might submit to EOVA between the idea and getting it submitted and feeling like you did a great job? What would you guess? Well, there's a good reason that they're giving you from October 1 to December 3rd, because it doesn't happen overnight. So this is what I call as the grant development pyramid. And here's our idea down at the bottom. And then we're going to go through a couple of layers of planning work before we actually start writing this grant. So in this cartoon, you can see that writing the answers to their questions is really kind of the tip of the iceberg, and that this planning work is a lot of the time that you're going to need to get to the finish line. So the way I think about it is you have an idea, then you have to freeze frame the idea. I call it scoping the idea. This is what it is. This is what we want to do. Then this line here is where you take it to your board of directors or the decision makers for your entity, for your business, and you say, I think I've got a great idea. Do you guys agree? And should we move forward with the planning work? And they're going to say, sure. Or they're going to say, you know, we've got 3 other ideas that just came into us, not now, right? So we ask to say, can we move forward? And then we go into planning what might go into this project. What partners do we need? What community input do we need? How are we going to get that community input? We do all that, and then we come back to the board and say, here's our project plan. Are we ready to go? And now we're ready to do the final project planning, and that's when we actually start writing the grant. Now, if your organization follows a pattern like this, the development pyramid, then instead of waiting for the grant application to show up or the grant to open, what it means is you can generate several ideas for your organization and work on planning them all at the same time. You're not dependent on the grant showing up. You're just dependent on the people that are going to do the planning work for the grants. So my mantra is, people think that there's a real lack of funding for grant projects, but that's not true. There's a real lack of thoughtful, well-planned projects that deserve funding. So if you focus on developing the thoughtful projects, you will be very successful at grant writing, because money will come out of the woodworks to fund your work, right? So if you hand Elena and Kate a well thought out project, you're going to make great friends from them because they're going to be happy to fund your work. Okay. Let me pull this back up.
Hey, Meredith, I just want to add on that note, we do recognize that, you know, grant writing it does take time, and we know that you all, you know, probably don't have your own designated person to work on grants. So, you know, if the project's not a great fit for our program, like, we want to let you know as soon as possible. So as you're working on your ideas, please reach out to us. And like Meredith said, if it's not the right fit for our program, but then we know about that idea and we can work with you to find, different funding if we're like, yeah, let's pursue this another way. So we just want to make a good use of everyone's time.
Yeah, especially because that part about EOVA concentrating on projects that you're going to market out of state, if that's not really what you're working on right now, there are other entities that will fund work where you're going to market within your community. All right. Okay, so like I said, 2 weeks for each of these layers. And sorry about that. Now, what we don't want to do is shortcut that too much and end up with a pyramid like this. So here we've waited to the last minute and we don't have any time for project planning because that grant is due. So instead of the planning work, we're just going to approach their questions and start writing. Now, because I'm a visual person, you can see that the shapes here are really different. Now, when Elena receives a proposal that was put together like this, what is she going to read? What is she going to think about this project? Well, because there's no planning, when she reads your answers, she's probably going to see that your answer kind of wavers because as you start answering her questions, you're actually planning your project as you go. And so when she starts reading, she may start out with a project that's going to change as she reads through the application because you're using her questions in order to figure out what you're actually going to do. So to grant reviewers, it's really obvious if it's put together at the last moment. And people want to pretend that that's not the case, but it takes several meetings for you to come to agreement about what's actually going to happen, what equipment you're going to need, what are the prices of that equipment, where are your signs going to go, do you have permission from the owners to put signs there? So starting early will not only give you a better product, but it's going to decrease your stress because none of us wants to work under the pressure of this compressed planning process. We don't want that to happen to anybody. Okay, so here we go. How do we schedule this workout then? Well, Kate let us know that our deadline is December 3rd. So if we go back 2 weeks, that means that we need to start addressing the questions on their application by November 19. That means that by November 5th, we'd better have our project pre-planned and we need to go to our board of directors and let them know about what we're thinking so that they have time to kind of negotiate, give us input we might not want to hear, but that we need, and so that it aligns with what our organization wants to do. And that means that we had better have our idea and be ready to work 6 weeks out. So that's exactly why they're opening the grant so early. It's to kind of force you or prod you to go ahead and start that planning work. You're going to be supported, you're going to be submitting your work through an online portal. And as Kate mentioned, having a conversation with the DMO is really helpful. They might give you some great ideas for what EOVA is going to be looking for and how they might partner with you. Okay, so in these grants, there are some rules about site approval and permitting. You're going to have to show, if your project involves signage at all, that the owner that the signs are going to go on is approving of letting you be there. So that's going to come in a letter from the site owner that says, yes, I'm working with the city of Vail. They'd like to put a trail sign on my property, and I'm happy to be supportive of that. Now, if Todd really wants to market his trail well, maybe he wants 10 signs up to help guide people to that trail system. Well, if that's the case, Todd is going to have to get 10 different letters from all the different property owners, or he's going to choose to put those signs up on the city's property so that he only needs one letter. So for every sign you have, you're going to need a site letter. Now, permitting is also required. So if you're planning to put, if Todd wants to put a restroom up at the trailhead, then he's going to need a permit for the restroom. And he doesn't have to have the permit when he submits the grant, but he needs to have a letter from the agency that gives the permit, just outlining what the permitting process is. So that's not going to happen overnight. So he's going to get that done in the first 2 weeks. And then he'll know that the project's still a go. He's able to get the signage letters. He's able to get some information about permitting. Now, those letters have to get submitted with the online grant, and it's going to take him a couple days, maybe, to retrieve those letters from all the property owners, get them scanned into his computer and ready to upload. Now, here's an important detail for these online systems. The scanned letters will usually come in the form of a PDF file, and you're going to need some way to combine all those PDF files into one file, because Todd won't be able to submit 10 individual letters. He can only upload one file. And you can actually do that by just printing them all out and then scanning them all together if you don't have Adobe software to do it for you. All right. And then the other kind of permitting part is if you're doing a capital project like a restroom or something you're building, then you need to have some kind of crude preliminary drawing showing where it's going to go. It's going to go, here's the trailhead, and this is where we think the bathroom is going to go. I like to use Google Maps to take a picture of the location, and then you can just draw in where the feature is going to be. It doesn't have to be an engineering drawing at all, just to let them know that you've thought about the location. Okay, that's site approval and permitting. Now, letters of support, same thing. I'm not going to wait for that 2-week window where I'm writing the grant to ask for letters of support. So I'm going to ask for those way back in the 5 weeks out from the grant deadline. And that's because you may have to ask several times for people to return your letters, because it's kind of a big deal for somebody to take the time to think about their connection to the project, what your project, how it's going to benefit the community. And they may want to call and talk to you about things that you suggest go into the letter. So I always give that plenty of time. If I have to submit 3 letters of support, I'm going to ask 5 different groups to do them, and I'm just going to count on 2 of those groups flaking out on me. because I don't want to take the chance of not having a letter of support. Now, the application for EOVA, they say that letters of support aren't required, but that they're highly encouraged. Elena, do you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah, I think, just recognizing sometimes, the challenges of getting a letter of support. But I think, to your previous slide around like permitting and things, I mean, those are definitely needed. More the community collaboration. I mean, that is an area that will be on the scoring sheet, and we'll get the scoring sheet online as well, so you can also really see, how we'll be measuring the applications, but really showing that community engagement, community support is really helpful. So that's where we want to strongly encourage everyone to get those letters of support, but we didn't make it a requirement.
Great. Now, when I'm writing grants, and I do that all the time, and I hear somebody say strongly encouraged, in my mind, it's saying it's required, that they're going to really wonder what's the matter if you don't submit a letter of support. Now, if it's the night before the grant's due and my letter of support has fallen through, I'm going to go ahead and submit the application, but I'm going to want to talk about the community partners that we have in the narrative so that they know it's that we're being collaborative. Okay, so here's some guidance about letters of support. Letters of support aren't something that you ask for once a year from a group and use for all of your grant applications. It's not, hey, I love this group, they do great work all the time. But letters of support are actually almost like a contract. It's saying, what relationship do we have to this group that wants to do this project, and how are we participating? It's also, since letters are kind of personal, it gives you the chance to help the funders understand what the problem is that this group is trying to address. What are the grant funds, how are the grant funds going to have a positive impact on the community by solving a problem? So letters of support can be a real asset for your project. And so what I think of is, well, if I'm asking for letters of support from another group, then I had better be ready to offer them letters of support for what they want to do. And so if you can get in a relationship with another group where you're both supporting each other with letters of support, it really reflects well on both of you. So sometimes people ask, well, do you ever write letters of support for somebody? So I'm writing the grant, I need a letter of support, and I'm asking Chris Chester, maybe, will you write me a letter of support? And she's saying, well, gosh, I don't have a lot of time. I could just say, I'll write it for you, and then you can sign it. Well, what do you think's wrong with that? It happens in the grant writing world, but what it doesn't do is it doesn't give Chris the chance to share what she's really feeling about the project, or that she really understands what's going on. And it doesn't actually give me the chance to bring her up to speed on what we're doing and let her contribute. So we want that push and pull. We want to bring other groups into our work. And so the letters of support actually show that relationship, the healthy relationship. Any questions about that? It takes a while. That's why we're starting so early. I usually follow up every week if I'm giving them 2 weeks with a letter, I ask if they want to have a conversation about my project or if they'd like to talk about ways that they can be involved. Those will create great letters of support.
Meredith, I have a question for you on letters
Yeah.
of support. I agree, and I believe someone dropped in the chat as well, you know, with just submitting a letter of support and, you know, having someone sign it, it definitely does lose that personal touch. But would you suggest like providing like some additional context or someone's, you know, like, you know, or like bullet points of, you know, the project, kind of giving that more contextual information?
Sure. So when I ask for a letter of support, especially if I'm asking for multiple ones, I might send one to Shannon and Chris and Todd and say, here's the project we're doing. Here are the important elements of what we're going to do. Here's the problem we're trying to solve. And 1, would you mind writing a letter of support for us? And 2, would you like to get together or on Zoom to talk about the project and what's important to convey? So it's a great way to do some outreach and some partnershiping. Almost like what they're suggesting for contacting that DMO. So if you contact the DMO and you're telling them about your project and what you want to do and how they might partner, that might be the time to ask them to write a letter of support for your project, right? So it's that networking part. Okay, the next piece is our supporting documents. So it's rare that funders just ask you to write about the project and not ask you for additional information. Now, a good part of the additional information is because they want to know about the health of your organization. So they want a set of financial statements, which is a snapshot of the profitability of your nonprofit or for-profit. They may want a copy of your budget, your organizational budget, or a project budget, or both. And they may want a copy of your board of directors list. So when EOVA posts the grant program on their website on Friday, they will have a list of supporting documents. So Kate, do you want to cover those?
Yeah, I can go over those. And I think we do have a slide. Here we are. So the project supplemental documents that you'll want to start collecting early on. This is great to do early in the project, sort of as you're waiting to hear back from folks, is start assembling your project budget. And EOVA, we do have a form, a template form for you to use. You'll want to start building your project timeline. And we also have a sample that was sent out with this, the meeting information, but we can put that on our website as well. You'll want to include those project support letters if, you know, again, recommended, but not required. And then you'll need to include your federal tax ID letter. And if you do have projects that involve on the ground work or signage, we'll need to see those approvals or permits. And then if you have marketing projects, you do need to include a distribution plan and associated budget costs.
Okay, great. I've got a question, Kate. So Todd is a municipality, it's not a nonprofit. So he's not going to have a federal tax ID.
Right. Yeah.
But he will have something that says he's a government entity, a
That's
letter
right.
describing that, and that's probably fine.
Mm-hmm.
So Todd doesn't want to leave that blank. He's going to create some type of letter saying how he fits the intent of tax-free. Okay,
Right.
Excellent. Now, if I have questions about any of these supporting documents and I don't know what how my organization might fit in, or if I need it, what do I do?
Reach out to Elena or myself.
Excellent. Okay, so that's the supporting document list. And what I'll say about that is it takes a while to get all of those documents together. So what I do, because I'm writing maybe 10 grants a month, is I have a list of kind of generic supporting documents that all the funders are going to want. And I keep those updated and both in hard copy form and online so that I have easy access to them. I know where they are and they're ready to go. Okay, so another required document from EOVA is going to be the timeline of activities. So when are you going to do the work of the project? And this is actually a tricky question because the answer is, well, unless we get the money, we're not going to do the project, right? So you're hoping that you'll be able to start at a certain point, but you won't know that for sure until they make their decision about funding. So it depends is the real answer, but we have to put something on paper to show them that we know how long it's going to take. Now, the second question, can you start early? The answer usually for these types of projects is no. And here's why. This is what's going to happen. You've got a great idea. You submit the grant application. That's going to be December 3rd. And then on January 22nd, they're going to come out with a list of here are all the groups that have been awarded grants. Now, awarded grants means they want to give you the money, right? But they're actually not going to give you the money until they have a signed contract with you where you outline, here's all the work we're going to do, and they outline, here's the payment, and here's what our expectations are. So in some cases, funders don't want you to start your project until the contract is actually executed. In other cases, the funder will say, as soon as we've awarded you the grant, then you can get started. But you can understand that this contract is a legal document. And if you're doing work back here in December because you want to get started early, then the contract isn't going to make legal sense. So you want to make sure that you know from the funder, is it the award date when you can start, or is it the contract date? And Elena, you want to go ahead and give us advice on that?
Yes, so the grant guidelines do specify that work can officially begin when the grant application status is notified. So,
and that's going to be January 22nd. So all of your timelines should start with this grant award notification. January 22nd, and then all your activities will go after that. You have 1 year from the date of that grant award to complete your projects. And again, Elena said early on, if things aren't going as planned and you need to renegotiate the end date, just give her a call and you guys can work that out. But in the application, she's going to want to see that everything fits into a year. Any questions about that? Now, this is actually the sample form that we're going to hand out to you. It's just a sample one that I created. So you can use another format for showing your timeline. Just make sure that it's clear. And I actually like the timeline because it allows me to put a lot more details in about what's going to happen than will fit in the narrative space. Sometimes they limit how many words we can say for each question, but you can see there are a lot of words and there's a lot of detail on this form. So it really helps flesh out what's going to happen. Okay. Now, project budget, I see we've got 9 minutes, so we may not get through everything, but we'll go as far as we can today. The project budget is just saying, what are we going to need to accomplish this project, and how are we going to pay for the things that we need? So the budget is going to be not just the money that we need, but it also might include gifts, in-kind gifts that people offer us. So there are a couple of rules about budgeting that are helpful. If you're talking about cash, revenue is what you're going to bring in, and expenses are what is it going to cost to do your project. Now, in some cases, your budget might not balance for a cash budget. There may be a reason that you might have money left over. This might be contingency in case things cost more than you thought they would. That's okay for cash. When you start adding in-kind labor or contributions for budgeting, because that's not real money, revenue and expenses have to exactly match so that they cancel each other out. So that's just some tips for when you start to budget using their form. Now, in-kind stuff is great. They want to see if you have gifts like this, because those are resources that are going to be needed. But how do you estimate in-kind labor? And kind of giving a scan of what could you use. If you go online, then the independent sector says that volunteer time is worth $25 an hour in Oregon. Do you use that? Do you use minimum wage? Well, what I do is I make sure that I check with the funder, because we want to use their guidelines. So Elena, what would you like people to use for an in-kind amount?
I think that's a great question. And I would say it really depends on what the in-kind work is. So if it is, like a contractor, for example, what is their rate? Like what would be, what is, if you were to pay them, what would that amount be? If it's materials, if it's, for like a construction type project, what are the cost of materials? And then, if it is volunteer time, especially for nonprofits, I think using the independent sector rule of thumb works for us as well. So we don't have it spelled out in the grant guidelines, but that's where I think in the budget template where you can say, you can include contractor time, $25 an hour, and then whatever that equates to.
Okay, great. So that's the difference. I call it general volunteer time and then professional volunteer time, because the contractor will be volunteering too if it's in kind, but it's at the higher rate. So Elena's saying they don't spell it out, so you can pick how you want to value the volunteer time. Okay. Let me pull it up again. So the professional in kind, that's where she was talking about the contractor. The contractor might charge $60 an hour. So you could put that down in your project budget. My tip is to be conservative. When people start seeing $100 an hour as a basis for in-kind gifts, people can maybe start raising an eyebrow. The other thing is, and this is kind of sad, grant writing usually doesn't count as an in-kind donation. And why is that? That's because it happens before the grant is funded. So it's going to happen before January 22nd. So you don't get to count that labor. Kate inserted a picture of the budgets. I want to point out just a couple of things. So here is an in-kind, and you can see that they're spelling out the cost basis of this in-kind time. They're saying, we're going to have somebody do illustrations, and they're going to give us this gift that's worth $24 an hour. And we guess that they're going to spend 250 hours doing that work. So the value of that is $6,000 of in-kind. For every item that you're listing as expenses or in-kind, we want that cost basis. How do you know that how much it's going to cost? And how many hours are they contributing? Unless it's a contract with a flat fee. And then you're probably going to have to share what the bid was. Okay. So the budgets, if you run into problems with it, or you want somebody to look over it and make sure it's accurate, that's when I'd be giving Kate another email or call to see if she will review my budget in advance. Okay. And this is their budget form. What I do when I'm writing a grant is I always do everything in my own Excel documents using my own internal template. I make it make sense to me, and then I will transfer the information to their budget form. I'm going to send them their budget form. I'll keep a copy of it, but I'll also have my internal budget, because that's what my colleagues are used to seeing. And they don't need somebody else's, they don't have to look at somebody else's budget. They can review my internal budget. Okay. I think I'll end with the fact that the budget needs to tell enough about what you're doing that those of us that love math can pick up your budget and kind of tell our own story of what you're going to do. What's going to be involved in this project? So if you're talking about something that you're going to do in the narrative, then make sure that that work is also in your budget. Even if it doesn't cost anything, maybe it's something that a group of volunteers are going to do, make sure that you go ahead and guess what the value of that volunteer time is and stick it in your budget. We don't want to surprise anybody. They've read through your budget and they think they know what your project is, and now you're talking about something completely different in your narrative. That's going to make it hard for us math lovers. We're going to get confused in your narrative. Okay, I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and skip down to the end. I do want to show you that I have a couple of slides that talk about other grant programs. Travel Oregon has its own grant program. They actually have a couple, and they're offered throughout the year. You can find out about them on their website. The Oregon Community Foundation has a grant program. They will fund tourism work. They have deadlines twice a year. They will fund projects between $5,000 and $50,000, and there's a link to their website so you can learn more about that. Some of your projects that are art related, I'm thinking of the museum passport, might go to the Oregon Arts Commission or the Cultural Trust, and there are links to their grant programs. And then the Ford Family Foundation, they're a great foundation because they are the third richest foundation in Oregon, only behind the Oregon Community Foundation and the Meyer Memorial Trust, and they only fund in rural communities. So that might be an avenue, especially for community building projects that have public convening spaces, or projects that deal with children, youth, and families. And then the last one is the state parks has several grant programs. And one of their areas are the Oregon Main Street programs. And they have grants that are for capacity building, helping you learn new things, and for capital projects. So that's it for today. That you've got my email, and we're gonna start tomorrow where we left off. We covered the planning details, and tomorrow we're really gonna talk about writing and making a story that's interesting out of your grant project. So thanks for your time and attention. That went fast, didn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm happy to stay around and answer questions, but I want to make sure that you all can carry on with your days. So thanks for your time.
Thanks so much, Meredith. And Kate and I will hang on for a little bit too if there are additional questions. We're happy to answer. So while you're here, we'd love to hear from you. And thank you all for attending, and hope to see you all again tomorrow.
Yeah, the only question I have right now is I don't have this on my calendar for tomorrow, so I didn't realize there was another meeting.
Okay, Kate, can you send Todd the registration link?
Yep, I'm happy to do that. And Todd, if you aren't able to join us tomorrow, we'll be recording tomorrow as well.
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
Hi, this is Jan.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thanks, Meredith. See you tomorrow.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So since we have this recorded, how do we access that if we do have to miss it tomorrow?
It'll be online on EOVA.com. So I think I dropped in the link earlier. The main website will be EOVA.com/grant-program. And I'll drop it in the chat one more time, just so it's there. But that'll be kind of the go-to for all things grant. Will also be, that's where we'll be adding, the FAQs, the budget forums, things like that. So, but we'll have links under the grant program page with the recordings.
Okay, and how do we know if for certain we are signed up for tomorrow?
Yeah. Kate will double check the list.
Yeah,
and we'll get back to it.
Yep, I will email you, Shelley, if you're not. Yeah.
Thank you, Meredith, very much. And Kate as well. You guys really proved to push through a lot of information in a short amount of time.
I hope it wasn't too much. Thanks, Delay. Shan, what can we do for you?
Well, I don't know. This is the problem. May not be the proper venue for what I'm looking for. I'm a nonprofit. I mean, a volunteer junkie. I belong to several organizations. The Moose for one, and community fellowship dinners for another here locally. I understand that the grants you guys are talking about, and I was a former travel agent, so it was very interesting. But what I'm trying to figure out is how this, or if this, we would even qualify for something like this, being as we are the Moose. The thing with the Moose is trying to get people into our lodges so that they can understand what our fraternity is all about. And I don't know if that's something that this venue would be for or not. Number one.
Okay. So here's what I'll say. There are Moose lodges like the one in Walport that are offering the use of its space to groups that want to do a retreat or are coming into town and need a meeting space. So if they're traveling a good distance to come, like if you're on the border of Oregon and they're coming in from Washington to use your facility, then marketing your facility as a rental place they can rent, that would qualify. But if you're trying to attract new members to the Moose Lodge, then those are going to be in your community, and that might not be a good enough alignment with the EOVA grants. You might just need to find a different funder that is interested in that part of your mission.
Okay, well, our mission actually is to share what we do, yes. But it's also to get people to our community, to our lodges, so that we can share what our community is all about. And that's why I thought, well, that's maybe a possibility.
Yes, so the Moose Lodge could partner with a larger visitor campaign. And so you could still be part of that work. It might just not be the Moose Lodge itself that would be the primary applicant.
Now, here's my other question. We are not, Moose Lodges are not a 501c3.
And
They're-
you actually don't have to be a 501c3 for the tourism grants.
Okay,
But you do have to have that mission that is aligned with EOVA.
right. And I'm new to grant writing at all. So I thought, well, if nothing else, maybe I could learn, and you're very good at that.
Oh,
Learn
good.
what, how a grant is even written.
Well, I think
So-
maybe you'll enjoy tomorrow then. The storytelling part is when you actually go, aha, that's how you do it.
Yeah, because right now what we're looking at is, but I also belong to another group, which is our community fellowship dinners that we do here locally. And that's just a twice a year thing at this point that we've been doing for almost 40 years. And it's all volunteer and it's all donations, Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners.
What town do you live in, Jan?
I live in Hermiston. My lodge is in Irrigan, but our community fellowship dinners are in Hermiston.
Mhm.
So, and we're trying to find out how to become self-sufficient. So that, well, right now we're having issues with our venue, to be able to say, we don't need to borrow this, and this in order to do this.
Right. So let's see, there are some funders like the Ford Family Foundation that will be biased against you because you aren't a 501c3.
Well, the community fellowship dinners is a 501c3.
Okay.
That one is.
Okay, terrific. And where are they held?
They're held in Hermiston.
In
we-
what building?
Right now, that's our issue. The last year was all takeout because of COVID. And apparently with Oregon being the way Oregon is, it's probably going to be all takeout this year. Which
Okay.
means we stand out in the cold handing out meals.
Right.
But we cook the meals right now we're using a church kitchen to prepare the meals. And then we'll go from there.
I think I would send you to the Ford Family Foundation and the Oregon Community Foundation, because they are focused more on the communities themselves and not
Awesome.
on visitors.
That I was hoping that you could help me with that direction.
Terrific.
I really
Okay.
appreciate it. Hey,
Great.
thank you so much. You guys are awesome. If it's all right, I will be here tomorrow.
Terrific. We'll see you
I'm
tomorrow.
pretty sure I'm registered for tomorrow.
Okay.
So,
Thank you,
all right.
Jen.
Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you for all you do. Bye-bye.
Yeah.